Hello, everybody. Welcome to Philosapiens. On Philosapiens, we critically examine the claims and concepts of religions. And so today, I think what we're going to do is we're going to review a review, basically. And this comes from a review of an interview taken by Piers Morgan of Richard Dawkins, and it was reviewed by two Muslim apologists, Subboor Ahmed and Ali Dawah. I think most of you who listen to this channel are well aware who these two Dawah guys are. So what we're going to do is we're going to review the review that they have done of Piers Morgan, and it was about, I think the title that we have given is End of Atheism. With me, since it's an English stream, is Madan. Madan, do you want to add anything to just give a background of what this review was, basically?
I don't know actually much about this. I've not actually seen it myself, but I know it's quite hot currently, and it's roaming around YouTube. And it involves Richard Dawkins, obviously, and it involves two Muslims who are religiously critiquing Richard Dawkins, as they do, and apparently it's symbolized in the video. Apparently, Piers Morgan pressurizes Dawkins into difficult territories and defeats him, let's say, in argument. And this is supposed to be synonymous with a victory over atheism and or the decline of atheism, or the end of atheism, as it's described. So what I'll do is actually be looking at it for the first time with fresh eyes, and and so let's see what happens.
All right, let's. So I've just added the video. It's pretty much the beginning. I think it's a very short video. I'm still going to run it 1.25x, Madin, unless you want me to just run it normal speed, because it's a short video. So maybe if our review finishes fast enough, then we might review something else, or maybe open the stream for callers to join in, or whatever, right? Basically,
Whilst you play it, let me just change screens for a moment. Yeah, I just need to deal with something very quickly. It'll take me about 30 seconds. Okay.
You play not a problem.
Yeah, you play the video.
Shall I play? You'll be able to listen to it, right?
I'll be able to listen to it. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
But doesn't code have to have a coder?
No, of course it doesn't.
Okay, that doesn't make any sense.
Just imagine the people back in the day when they would have to travel certain distances for months or even years. What is one thing that they would carry with them? Imagine you have the Quran wherever you...
And Dawkins is going to be in... Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this reaction video. We're going to be watching Piers Morgan and Dawkins. It's going to be interesting. What do you think of this, Adi?
I'm excited to see the cultural Christian atheist, see what he has to bring. And, is he going to defeat Piers Morgan? Because, he's more senior, in knowledge.
The clash of titans.
When scientists and philosophers reason from evidence, they typically use a method of reasoning that has a technical name. It's called inferring to the best explanation, where the best explanation is one where you're invoking a cause which has the kind of powers that would be required to explain the phenomenon of interest. And you correctly pointed out in your conversation with him that when you get back to that, what physicists often call the singularity, the point where matter, space, time, and energy begin to exist, the materialist is really up against a huge conundrum, because prior to the origin of matter, there is no matter to do the causing. That's what we mean by the origin of matter, that's where it starts.
Right.
And so if you want to invoke a cause which is sufficient to explain the origin of matter, you can't invoke matter.
You see, Richard Dawkins, this is the nub of, I think, my whole issue with your position on this. And you can respond, obviously, to what you just heard in a moment. But when you...
All right, Madan, are you back?
Yes, I'm here. I've been here. I've watched most
All
of
right.
it.
Yeah, I think so. To start off with, so inference to best explanation is probably a good, rule. Basically, you can say it's a rule of thumb, basically. But the point that he started about the beginning of the universe, basically, I mean, there was matter at certain point, and before that, there was no matter, right? And this is the gap in our knowledge, basically, that these religious apologists prey upon, basically, right? And they pray. Am I using the right word? Praying, basically, right?
Yeah. That's fine.
And they prey upon it, basically, thinking that most of the people don't know exactly what happened there. I mean, the science doesn't tell anything about that basically beginning. I mean, it says that, matter condenses to such a small unit basically, beyond which we don't have any idea. You can think of it as being space-time manifold basically, right? And beyond space-time manifold, you can have a manifold of something very different basically. You might not even call it anything relating to the matter that we know of. It could be a quantum realm, it could be a manifold, something, it could be a manifold completely different from even the quantum realm pretty much, right? But it doesn't tell us that there was an absolute beginning basically, right? And I mean, this is just one answer, but apart from that, you can go on and on basically, right? You can have very different things existing before that pretty much. So that's one of the things that they keep saying, but it doesn't really tell the whole story pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, would you be able to play Stephen Meyer's point again when he talks about about matter? What does he say again? Let me just hear it again.
Yeah, hear that.
Technical name is called inferring to the best explanation, where the best explanation is one phenomenon of interest. And you correctly pointed out in your conversation with him that when you get back to that, what physicists often call the singularity, the point where matter, space, time, and energy begin to exist, the materialist is.
So see, the point I'm saying, this thing begin to exist, matter, time, space, and all, and that's probably fine in terms of that lingo. But I mean, this matter, this space, time, and all those things are probably not as we know, because in quantum realm, all these matter and time behaves very differently, because our understanding is based on classical physics basically, and in that realm we need something of a quantum, we need quantum gravity to work basically in a very physicsy term basically, right? And we don't have that theory as yet basically, a unified theory of gravity we don't have basically, so we don't know how it behaves basically at that point. So these are using some very superficial knowledge of physics to come to a conclusion that is not there basically. You want to add something to it? Because I have quite a few things in mind, but then
press play again. Press play again. Let me just hear what he says after that.
Really up against a huge conundrum, because prior to the origin of matter, there is no matter to do the causing. That's what we mean by the origin of matter, that's where it starts. Right. And so if you want to invoke a cause which is sufficient to explain the origin of matter, you can't invoke matter.
You see, Richard Dawkins, this is the nub of, I think, my...
Right. So first of all, I don't think Piers Morgan is at all qualified or capable of understanding this. I don't think he's read anything upon this, and I don't think Stephen Meyer either is necessarily qualified, although maybe a bit more or so. Essentially what it's saying that the origin of matter cannot be explained with more matter, right? But where Stephen Meyer getting this kind of conclusion from, where people are saying that the origin of matter can be explained with even more matter necessarily, right? Is that a dominant view within physics? Not necessarily. Is that something that even philosophers of religion, who are atheists or secularists, or people who are subscribing to a view that does not involve a God creating the universe, for example, maybe materialism or naturalism, are they saying necessarily that the origin of matter was caused by more matter? No, they're not. So that's just, first of all, a massive overgeneralization and straw man and misrepresentation.
Straw man, basically, yes,
right?
Exactly.
Right. That is one view, that perhaps that there's more matter before that. And now here's the thing. This is what Stephen Meyer may be raising an eyebrow, or even Piers Morgan raising an eyebrow, because of the language being used, which is that the origin of matter means that matter originated and therefore there was no matter. And then obviously to explain that there cannot be more matter, a matter before it to explain it, right? Because that's the beginning point of matter. But the people who do say stuff like that, who say stuff, for example, matter caused the creation of matter, let's say, or caused matter to come into existence. In other words, caused the Big Bang. They're not saying They're not holding on to the view that this really is the origin of all matter, or they're saying that this is the origin of local matter, right? That's one view that I've sketched out. Am I correct, Philo? I can hear your mic going off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly the view that most of the physicists hold. Basically, it's the origin of the local matter that we see, and we don't know anything beyond that, pretty much. And this is
Exactly.
also true for the local manifestation of the universe, pretty much, right? Because you
Yes.
can take equations all the way back from that local manifestation of the universe only, right? So
Exactly.
yeah,
So as I'm not a physicist or a cosmologist, but everything that I'm saying is going to be like a general, superficial sort of alignment with this cosmology community, because I have a lot of people, academics that I know of, who are in that realm, and they can substantiate what I'm saying, even though I can't specify it in the scientific jargon as they can do. But as I know, the idea is that there could have been an ocean of big bangs, and this big bang is a local big bang in a sea of many other big bangs prior to it, or what simultaneous with it. That's like one model or multiple models. Again, I don't know the specificities.
multiverse model, you can say,
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah.
that could be it. That could, yeah, exactly. And so there's various different interpretations and understandings of what could have been the case, right? And none of them are logically incoherent or contradictory. It would be incoherent if you say that this was the only Big Bang or only form of matter. Then you go, the only form of matter was caused by more matter. But wait, didn't you just say that's the only form of matter? Well, when you say that's the only matter and then you add more matter, that's a contradiction. And then Stephen Mayer would be correct, right? But that's not what the people who are talking about, as we've just discussed, talking about when they say that the matter caused matter. That what we mean is, again, the local matter is an effect of matter elsewhere. So in reality, that's not necessarily the beginning of the universe, right? Or all of the universe. You could say that's the beginning of our local universe. And, you know, plenty of cosmologists subscribe to this potential view. Sean Carroll, for example, has talked about it in his lectures, his books. I know, to speak to a cosmologist. Why do we have a biologist? No, he's not. Wait. Stephen Mayer, he's a philosopher of science. He's not competent in physics or cosmology. And Piers Morgan is a journalist. And we have Richard Dawkins, who's a biologist. These are not necessarily the best people to talk
I think
about.
Stephen Meyer is a philosopher of biology or something like that. Philosophy of science and biology or something like that. I mean, he does. I think these Discovery Institute guys, and I usually abstain from doing an ad hominem attack, but they have constructed this whole aura of intelligent design is a science kind of a thing, and have been really attacked by some really known scientists, pretty much. I mean, they have been reviled pretty much by these scientists, pretty much. It's not me who's saying. You need to go and check what all these, even if you go to Wikipedia page of his, you'll see that the kind of reviews, the criticism he gets from all the other well-known scientists, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean,
Discovery Institute guys have done so much damage to the idea behind good science, basically, right?
Yeah, I mean, first of all,
sorry, Martin, go ahead.
No, first of all, the first thing that I would say is it's not an ad hominem attack. An ad hominem attack is a attack on somebody's character, reputation, personality traits that are irrelevant, that has no effect on the bearing of one's argument and or the evidence produced or the testimony, whatever. It's not an ad hominem, for example, to say that.
Right. I mean, you're right technically. I just wanted to avoid myself from getting into that. Because you are attacking, Stephen Meyer because he's. But yeah, here we are attacking his argument, and for good reasons. Basically, you're right.
Yeah, no. What I'm saying is that he's unqualified to talk about these things. So that is relevant. That's an appropriate use of authority. It's not a fallacy of authority or an ad hominem, right? A fallacy of authority or authority fallacy is when you use a false authority to support your argument, right?
Right.
Yeah, or an ad hominem is an irrelevant personality characteristic. But in this case, you do need to be knowledgeable about the science to understand what you're talking about. In other words, what they should, if you're not knowledgeable about it, you should cite and reference, right? the particular field and what the experts are saying. So if anything, Stephen Meyer is using his own sort of understanding rather than citing and referencing what physicists are saying. He's obviously misrepresenting the physics community, and then layering on top of that his own inexpert, unqualified opinion from some completely disparate field that has no bearing on cosmology, has no cosmological training whatsoever, and he's saying things like, and it's evident in what he's saying. And by the way, since we're attacking the reasoning of his arguments and attacking his character, it's not necessarily an ad hominem at all. The fact that he's saying matter is created in the universe, and that's the origin of matter, is a gross misrepresentation. It's been repeatedly corrected upon by physicists and cosmologists, that what we mean by the Big Bang or the beginning.
I mean, no serious scientists consider that to be a I mean, they don't say that it's not a possibility, but
Yes.
they're the jury is hung on it pretty much.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean,
Basically, there is no consensus amongst the cosmological or physics community that the Big Bang is the absolute beginnings. Simple as that.
I mean, and these guys would like to have it a beginning from nothing, and that's exactly their point. Basically, there was nothing, and then there was matter, and this is the kind of beginning that guys like Stephen Meyer are talking about. And none of a cosmologist or scientist that I know of says that kind of a thing, pretty much. Even if they agree that there was a beginning in space-time, most of them say it was just a beginning of the exponential expansion of the universe, pretty much.
Yes.
But what was before that, nobody knows, pretty much. It could be very many different manifolds or realms that we don't have any understanding of, pretty much.
Absolutely.
And one more point I wanted to make here, Madin, and you'll probably be a better person to talk about regarding this. You can have effects without causes, and you can have so the kind of thing that these guys need to differentiate between is the cause and explanation. Something might have might not have a cause but may have an explanation, and the vice versa, pretty much, right? So just because that you can get back to the to the beginning of the universe, it is quite possible that there's no cause, right? I mean, it's quite possible that there's no cause. Maybe for eternity past, maybe this universe is a necessary existence of whatever came prior to it, pretty much, right? So that's the point I'm trying to make here.
Well, if you mean an effect occurred without a cause,
right,
then that would not just be about explanations, but that would be about causation and effects. Whereas an explanation need not talk about causality at all, or talk about
that's what I'm saying, that those two are different things, pretty much, right?
For example, For example, God has no, in theory, God has no cause, but it's the explanation for his existence is in and of itself, because Leibniz argument, principle of sufficient reason, modal logic, you may say, contingency and necessity idea conceptions shows that, for example, if God is like a necessary being, then either he has explanation outside of himself or within himself, and in case of God, it's within himself, in the sense that the explanation is that it is necessary, right? If it's necessary, then so does God have a cause? No, it doesn't have a cause, but there is an explanation within in and of itself, and that's something different, right? So in that sense, God would be some sort of eternally existing being, and therefore there's no cause before it, and he's not an effect of anything else, but he has an explanation. The explanation is not synonymous with cause, and the exact model can be appropriated and applied into the context of a naturalistic universe. So it could very well be that there is a space-time, or there is some sort of natural universe, or something, quantum realm, quantum mechanics, whatever you want to call it, and that itself doesn't have any cause, but it's necessary. Right, so it's not contingent, and therefore it doesn't have a cause explanation outside of itself. and in this case, neither a cause outside of itself, right? But it has an explanation that is necessary. So it has no cause, but it's necessary. Yeah, you can have something like that. But we need to know which one we're talking about here, because if we accept that there was an effect without a cause, then we're talking about whether or not effects can come without an external cause before it or prior to it, right? If we're talking about that the effect was always there eternally, then it's not really an effect. We should say it's not an effect. It's not a. It's like God. It's eternally been there all the time, right? And therefore it's necessary. You see that? So
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's mangling of definition pretty much in the sense, right?
Yeah.
Because
So it
you
depends on
can't use the.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, so if we're trying to justify that an effect can come out without a cause, then when we can't justify that by appealing to necessity,
Right.
right? But if we're appealing to necessity, then we kind of we're saying that there wasn't an effect without a cause. You see that? We're saying that it was always there.
Right.
Right? So it depends which version we're talking about, really. So if there's an atheist who thinks actually the universe came into existence and there was no cause, then it's an effect without a cause.
Without
And
a cause, right?
Yeah. If he wants to justify the coherence of that, he needs to explain how effects can come without a cause. Isn't that an analytical contradiction? Isn't there something weird about that? Isn't that metaphysically bizarre? Is it logically
No, but
impossible?
then the atheists can claim that the theists do themselves believe in one such kind of a thing, pretty much, in a sense.
Maybe
Right?
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can go down that route, or he can possibly believe that he sees no contradictions with the idea of effects coming into existence without causes, right?
Right.
That there's no contradiction in that idea. Why should there be a contradiction, right? The fact that causes produce effects doesn't necessarily mean we can't conceive of a situation where something comes into existence, but it doesn't have a cause. There was no prior event that made it happen. If somebody can conceive of that, in the same sense they can conceive of a pink fairy or a pink elephant, right? And not in the same sense they cannot conceive of a square triangle. Yeah, because there's a contradiction. Is it like a square triangle? Some people may say that no, I can actually imagine something coming into existence and there was no cause behind it. Right? Like smoke just comes out of nowhere, but there was no chemical reaction prior to it, or there was no friction, or there was no match.
Or fire, nothing.
Or fire. Yeah. And I can imagine that. So it's not, but I can't imagine a square triangle. So here's one example of an effect, something happening without any cause. Yeah, I'm not saying that can happen scientifically. I'm saying it's logically coherent. There's no contradictions. As a one possible world where the science, quote unquote, science is different, where smoke just comes out and there's nothing else.
I mean, there are precedents to it. Basically, you can see the decaying of a radioactive element. There's no cause of its decay, pretty much, right? And the fact is the decay, pretty much, right? But you know that how much it's gonna decay, right? Because it's gonna decay exactly 50%. It's that's what it is called, half-life, pretty much, right? In a given amount of time, it's gonna decay to 50%, pretty much. When it's gonna decay, you never know. What's causing that decay? You don't know. So there are certain of those kind of things without causes. When you can have those, I mean, at least as of now, that's what our understanding is, and the same is true with go ahead.
No, you're correct. That's in terms of radiocarbon decay and etc. But let me just say though, there is a difference in the sense that we are imagining a world in which exists and things coming into existence in it. And in the case of the origins of the universe, if we're supposed to imagine there was nothing, then we're literally saying something came from nothing, which is might be a little bit more of a difficulty, right? And, right. And we did have a stream about this before, and I actually think it is a difficulty that you may have to face, and maybe the strongest point in the Kalam cosmological argument is perhaps the something can't come from a nothing point argument. Total non-existence, can something arise? But let me just say, whatever my personal convictions are on that, there isn't any consensus amongst experts on this. It's very open-ended, right? Let me give you an example. Somebody who doesn't find it difficult to imagine something coming out of complete nothing, right? And that is Sean Carroll, right? And he's a cosmologist, and he's a philosopher as well. He studied philosophy at a higher level, and he doesn't find any issue with the concept of something coming out of nothing, right? And so there's people who are disagreeing with, there's a lot of disagreement here. And the other thing is, these are difficult to figure out from our armchairs, and we may not really know exactly have a sound resolution from just conceptual analysis.
Can you reach to a conclusion on these matters with just analytical
very difficult,
thinking, pretty much. Very, very hard to do that, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. So if anybody's watching, we did a podcast on our first ever stream was on that. Can something come from nothing? Right. And we did discuss it extensively, so I'm not going to go too much into it now. So you guys.
I think what I'll do is I'll repost it. That stream is buried beneath all these new streams, and there's no thumbnail. So I think we need to make a new thumbnail and probably even re-upload it, basically, because that's one of our first streams, and we can have we discussed all these things in that stream, pretty much. Right.
Let's go back to the video, because I think we've gone on a bit of too many details and tangents.
Too many things. Yeah. So let's move ahead.
My whole issue with your position on this, and you can respond obviously to what you just heard in a moment, but when you go back to the very start, what is there before that? And that, I think I asked you last time, and Professor Meyer brought that up again as being the flaw in your position, which is, what is there before it starts? What is nothing?
This is a question for a physicist, not a biologist, but what I would answer to Professor Meyer is that we need to explain complexity in terms of simplicity. And of course, it's true that I cannot say what was there before the Big Bang.
Okay, so he started off, and the first thing that he said, with respect, Professor Dawkins, is false. We have to explain complexity with simplicity. What's the evidence for that? They call it Occam's razor, but how do we know that that is true? If we look at something, right, say you are studying the atom. It looks pretty simple. You got all these atoms that make up the world. Yet, what did physicists discover at the beginning of the 20th century? They discovered quantum mechanics. They discovered that actually, when you observe a particle, it acts differently to when you don't observe it. Young-Slit experiment. So the world turned out to be far more complex than we thought. So this assumption that everything has to be broken down into simple terms, what's the evidence for that? There's none.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
but I think here, Subboor, at least I agree with Subboor that you can't just simply make out that thing that complexity requires simplicity.
I'm laughing. I am laughing because these were the guys for a long time quoting William Lane Craig and so on and so forth, and Hamza Zorsas, who appealed to the fact that the simpler theory, Occam's razor, all this stuff, simpler theory.
Right. Yeah, true that. True.
And they were talking about the quantitative interpretation of Occam's razor, that is actual number of quantities or entities in the explanation.
Right.
The fewer the entities, the better the explanatory power, and also the fewer the entities.
They're God because God requires the least number of explanations, an all-powerful, omnipotent, omnibenevolent.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't even use that language. I didn't say at least number of explanations, because that is a different. I'm not talking about the elegance. So there's a.
No, I'm saying this is how they reach to their God, pretty much. That's what they use, pretty much. That if all these inference to best explanation, how can you reach that? You can't have a complex multiverse and all those things, and that's why you need just one single, tawheed, basically, right? That's what that's how they reach, basically.
Yeah. So that's why. Yeah, that's right. One of the virtues of a good scientific explanation that it's very simple, and by simple, most philosophers have moved away from the kind of quantitative interpretation of Occam's razor. By simple, they mean that it appeals to knowledge that is already known, or the fewer the number of ontological entities, right, that you have to invent, right? So this is the qualitative interpretation of Occam's razor. The qualitative interpretation is more to do with background knowledge, right? So just for recap on this, I've talked about it in the past. For example, it's more to do with probability. So suppose a light bulb goes off, and somebody proposes the reason that the light bulb has gone off is because the national grid has gone down in your local area. And you might think, wait, that's just a really improbable or complex explanation. The simpler explanation would be that my light bulb just got fused. But why is that? What's motivating behind that? Right? Why is it simpler? And why is that one simpler and the former more complex? Well, it's more complex is because it's far more improbable that simultaneously as your light bulb went down, the entire national grid in your local community, maybe spanning 50 miles across, has gone down, right? Right. That is that's one consistent way your electricity in your bathroom may have turned off. Yeah, true. Light bulb goes off. It could be because there's no electricity in your town. But the simpler explanation is what happens more frequently, which is that light bulbs go off all the time. National grids don't usually go off that much, right? So the more probable explanation is that it's just the light bulb that's gone off. Now, am I appealing to quantities here? The simpler? No, I'm appealing to the background evidence. I'm appealing to probabilities and frequencies. What's more frequent, right? And that's probably a better interpretation of simplicity. Now, here's the thing. What is Dawkins talking about? Which one is he talking about? Does he mean quantitatively? Because then I think Subboor is correct. If you posit a explanation with multiple parts, multiple entities, multiple components, it doesn't mean it's less likely, because as he said, the universe is full of complex explanations. There could have been a simple theory there was a simple theory, for example, of the elements on earth, water, fire. What was the other one? Philo? Earth, water. My brain.
Earth, water, fire, and
is it wind?
Wind, maybe. Yes.
I can't remember. Forgive us for the stupidity, but these things happen. But whatever the case, the four elements that I think, was it Plato? Was it Plato? Maybe before Plato, whatever it was, right? Thought about that is much more simple because there's only four quantitatively than the periodic table, which is a long list of very many different elements, right? So somebody would have said it's more probable that all the elements reduce and boil down to those four instead of the massive periodic table we have today. Well, no, the history of the universe shows that actually the universe is more and more complex. The more we learn about it, simple things don't explain it, more complex things explain it, right? So the quantitative interpretation of Occam's razor goes out the window for those reasons, and Subboor would be absolutely correct. But how do we know Richard Dawkins is talking about it in those terms? Right. In fact, I believe what many philosophers of religion argue is that posing supernatural entities or godlike beliefs, which involves a immaterial mind or soul working mysteriously, timelessly, is more complex simply because it's positing something very different from what we already know, right? Something unseen, which is again appealing to the qualitative interpretation.
Yeah, the probabilities we are appealing to, basically.
Yes.
Or the improbabilities, rather, in this case, very much.
Yes. So Dawkins might be saying that it's not a very simple theory. God is more complex because. Now I don't want to go too far now because he's going to go and explain it. Maybe I'm wrong, so I'll openly say maybe he's going to say something along the lines of the quantitative interpretation. Right, but God is more complex precisely because he's a mysterious entity, a disembodied mind that we've just never seen. These things don't explain things throughout the universe. What we're used to frequently is natural causes, physical causes, and etc., parts, particles, impersonal causes. So we should defer to that, not this mysteriously disembodied mind that we've just never seen before, that doesn't fit our background evidence, and therefore it's not an inference to the best explanation. It's inference to the worst explanation, if anything, because
Exactly.
it doesn't abide by one of the virtues of the scientific method, which is simplicity, right? So and then not only that, not only are we introducing this ontologically mysterious entity that we can't even define properly, this kind of spaceless, timeless thing, which might be even contradictory because it doesn't make sense. We can, because how can something be spaceless and timeless and actually be a person? There's contradictions in that. But then it also has these majestic attributes, right? Again, so it could be for those reasons, but let's just hear what Dawkins has to say. Sorry, Philo, you want to say something before we?
No, you explained it very well. So I think I don't have anything else to add here. Yeah, let's hear what Dawkins has to add to it.
He talks about like, what was the other guy's name?
Stephen Meyer.
Yeah, Stephen Meyer said, it's like they're just pointing back to the first cell or whatever it is. That doesn't explain anything. You're just pointing back to the matter. We're not talking about that. We're talking what created that cell, which is the question. But they keep saying, oh yeah, the first cell was complex and it replicated itself. In order for it to replicate itself, it has to have design in the first place. So yeah.
Absolutely. And why one cell? But also going back to naturalism and materialism, it can't explain matter itself.
Yes.
Because it's insufficient. But I just wanted to add something else. Look, Richard Dawkins knows his stuff when it comes to biology. Obviously, he does. But philosophy is a different thing. And Stephen Meyer comes from a philosophy of science background. He has a PhD from Cambridge. And Michael Roos, who's a well-known atheist, he is somebody that said that reading Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, made him embarrassed to be an atheist, and also said about him that he would fail at an introductory class of philosophy. So the problem here is not his science, but it's his overall thinking philosophy.
He's been popularized.
Physicists sometimes tell us that the word before doesn't even mean anything before the Big Bang. But whatever it was,
But it has to, doesn't it?
You cannot suddenly invoke.
Doesn't it have to? Someone as logical as you are, I believe you are, you think about this all very logically. A logical mind surely has to appreciate it. Before the Big Bang, there has to have been something before then. Otherwise, what is nothing?
A physicist will tell you that.
Yeah, but what do you tell me?
So when he says a physicist will tell you, who is he really referring to? He's referring to the likes of Lawrence Krauss. So what happened to Lawrence Krauss?
Yeah, he got a janaza.
So the fact is, he wrote a book, A Universe from Nothing. Nothing is something. You guys can see the debate with Hamza Swartzes. If you're going to talk about something as deep as the beginning of the universe, you have to speak about philosophy. You cannot just speak about physics, because that's a point at which physics and philosophy becomes one.
And they're so illogical. I mean, Piers calling them logical. They're not. I mean, these people use these terms and names, even like, rationality rules, irrationality rules. Because I don't understand logic, right? You guys are the absolute oxymoron, the opposite of that. And here, look, he demonstrates that when he asks a simple question, simply what was before that? I mean, it's just common logic, and he can't answer it.
I'm trying to tell you what a physicist would say, first of all. They would say that you cannot use the word before for the Big Bang. Time began at the Big Bang. There was no before the Big Bang. I know it's contrary to common sense. Physicists don't necessarily deal with common sense.
Well, it makes no sense, does it? And that's what I mean. I think you're a logical man. That cannot make sense to you.
So let's go back to Imam Ghazali's argument, the Kalam cosmological argument. Whatever begins to...
And let's pause it there.
I think Dawkins is completely right in saying that from a very technical perspective, that word before the Big Bang, if given the fact that time and space started at the Big Bang, which we don't have any conclusive evidence for, whether time reverses its direction, which is one theory. It's again attributed to Carroll Chen, right? It's called Carroll Chen model, where time reverses its direction. And there are multiple other theories where you can have there's no basically beginning at the Big Bang, pretty much, right? And so the word, if these guys are what these guys are saying is true, basically, if the matter space-time started at that point, then the word itself doesn't mean anything before that. Maybe in a causal sense, if you are talking about, then maybe you can ask that question. But from a very from our humanistic perspective, we have always seen events happening in time, basically. So asking that question before that from a time perspective doesn't really make sense. So at least from that point of view, Dawkins is right. And I mean, that's what even cosmologists agree with pretty much.
Yeah, so let me just highlight a few things there based on what Subboor said. First of all, the vast majority of philosophy of biology, philosophy of science, philosophy of mind, philosophy of epistemology, let's say, they're all atheists, right? They're all atheists. In fact, the philosophy of religion is now primarily theist, simply because most of the atheists don't engage in it anymore. They've left the field, they've left the flock, right? One of the most prominent philosophers of religion, atheists, Keith Augustine, retired, for example, and he left the field. There's a selection bias going on where theologians go into the philosophy of religion and they dominate it as a result. Whereas vast majority of all other fields, right, they comprise of and consist of atheists. So the point is, it's not very clear to me that when Subboor starts signaling to the idea that, oh, but you know, Stephen Meyer is a philosopher of biology, and when Richard Dawkins, well, philosophers are not agreeing with Stephen Meyer. Stephen Meyer's on the fringe, right? Stephen Meyer believes that there needs to be teleology or design behind evolution or intelligent design theories. That's what he is, part of the Discovery Institute. But look at a philosophy of biology textbook. There is no mention of a God being required. God has been defunct. So what is he talking about? So he's picking and choosing the philosophers that suit him. That's the first thing. He picks Stephen Meyer and then ignores everyone else. But you know, even the person that he's talked about, Michael Roos, he's a biologist, and he's a philosopher of biology, and he's an atheist. He doesn't accept that there has to be a God.
Yeah, he doesn't accept it. He's a philosophy of science guy, basically.
Yeah.
I think.
So why is he picking and choosing? You know, if anything, we should be agnostic, right? If you want to really, not if anything, it leans towards atheism. But if these guys realize that there are biologists and philosophers of biology who don't agree with Stephen Meyer, who critique Dawkins, and therefore they have the sophistication, but they still don't conclude in the same way Subboor and Ali Dawah is here, and Subboor is appealing to their credentials, then he should logically follow suit and go, oh, most of these philosophers are actually not agreeing with my conclusion that there has to be this monotheistic Islamic God and Quran is true. No, that's not the case, right? And then if he wants to move away from expertise, then we need to start talking about the reasoning. But if he's going to appeal to these or implicitly appeal to expertise, then we need to take that into account.
I think it's cherry picking your authority, basically. I mean, you're picking one of the fringe most authority on the subject, pretty much. I would say, right?
Yes.
Stephen Meyer.
Yeah. So anybody who's watching, pick up a book on philosophy of biology and see whether or not Stephen Meyer is like a prominent theorist that people accept as a
authority on these matters,
authority,
especially
yeah, and he's not. So if we're talking on that level of expertise, then please be aware of that. But on the other hand, what you were saying,
I think there is one book of his. Sorry, I'm not gonna derail. I promise the topic. There is one book of his that's been used by most of the apologists. I think it's on the code with DNA or something like that. That's the book. I forget the name of the book, but it's with the DNA code, basically. Is
the signature.
The signature, basically, right? So yeah,
and that's not taught. That's not taught as a authoritative, accepted, or even plausible theory. It might get a glancing mention depending on the philosophy professor, but in terms of biology and philosophy of biology, philosophy of biology is very, very materialistic, naturalistic, and that dominates most of the conversation, with maybe a glancing mention of a historical answer to many things that came in the form of God or deities or religion that was superseded by Darwin. Darwin is in the frontier, and any unclarities, any ambiguities are filled in with other mechanisms, maybe things like epigenetics or the extent of evolutionary mechanisms currently known, but everybody is safely within the car, within the bus that accepts that there's going to be a naturalistic mechanism. So wherever there are gaps in evolution or evolutionary theory, it's probably fueled by different ways or workarounds that is ultimately still biological and purely biological, impersonal causation, not personal causation. Agency doesn't even enter the script. So surely Subboor knows this. So why is he just pulling out one, doesn't even realize that philosophers, that when he talks about philosophy with so much authority, philosophers side against him.
Exactly, yeah. All right, let's run the video a little bit more. Madin, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make the link public, so whoever wants to join in. What do you think? Shall we have?
Yeah, you can do that. You can do that. As you do that, let me just say one more thing. Piers Morgan was saying it's just common sense, what is nothing, or and then Dawkins is saying that the concept of causality breaks down, or the idea of things happening requires time. It doesn't make sense to say before the Big Bang, right? Now, there's different ways to interpret that. Here's one way of interpreting it. It doesn't make sense to say there's anything before the Big Bang because time came into existence. Since time came into existence, there was no time, right? If there's no time, then there is no time for any causation. And therefore, it doesn't make sense to say there was something that then produced time. That's one way of thinking about it. But that sounds mind-boggling and nonsensical even. Now, here's the thing. If that's like a logical contradiction, now that some philosophers may say that's contradictory, and therefore it is an analytical contradiction, like a married bachelor or a square triangle, and therefore it has to be false. But it depends on how willing and far we want to go with this sort of a priori thinking, right? Here's some other views on this, is that most of our a priori thinking just breaks down and it doesn't make sense because our brains are just not going to work. For example, the philosopher James Ladyman, who wrote the book Everything Must Go, Why Metaphysics Needs to Be Naturalized, or Metaphysics Naturalized. He argues that none of these sort of a priori thinking actually maps to actually what's happening in the world. There's plenty of things, for example, four-dimensional structures that we cannot conceive with our brains that ultimately can exist, right? Because we know the math, we know the geometries, we've got it pinned down, but we can't imagine 4 dimensions. Right? So our imaginations are not always a good guide to tell us what actually is out there. In fact, we need to go out there and look at it. And sometimes our brains may just falter. So if we take that sort of approach, then it might not be, although it sounds in terms of the linguistics and we fail to be able to imagine something like time coming into existence whilst there was nothing or whatever. It might just be the case, right? And and Piers Morgan says that doesn't sound commonsensical. And Ali Dawah and Subboor wants to highlight the fact this is a contradiction. It's bizarre, it's stupidity. It's not good philosophy. Well, here's the thing. At what cost are we going to accept this? Because if we think this is dubious, let's say I'm happy to say this is dubious. It's a contradiction. It can't be held. At what cost? Well, if I give that up, then I have to accept a God model, which they're presenting. That's what they're saying, right? Unless there's another option, and there are other logical options. But let's say I get rid of that and just go for a minute and simplify and say I accept the God model that they're presenting. At what cost? So I can't have any contradictions. I can't have any similar sort of situations where we're saying something like it doesn't make sense to say before there was nothing and then time came into existence. It doesn't make sense. As Subboor is saying, as Piers Morgan is saying, there has to be something because otherwise, where would this thing come from? Well, okay, we can't have something similar in the case of the God model, but what would you have with the God model? We have very many similarities, very many similar things going on. You have a God who is also non-temporal. Remember, he's spaceless, he's timeless, right? So we have this timeless being that creates the universe. Right? So there was a moment where the universe did not exist. And then the universe came into existence. All Muslims would accept that because the Muslims believe God created the universe. Right? The universe wasn't eternal. There was a moment where God created the universe. But wait a minute. How could, from a timeless state, God create the universe? There's no time. He's a timeless being. If God is timeless, And time is not bound by any time. And there's no like seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There was a moment where there was no universe, but then there was another moment, a successive moment, but that implies time. There's a contradiction. If Muslims want to offer a flawless, logically coherent model, which this model of what Dawkins is talking about doesn't make sense, and they need to present therefore a flawless version without the same problems. Well, that has the same problem, or very similar problems, of logical contradiction. A timeless being operating time-like way, but he can't.
All right, Madan, there. Sorry to interrupt you, but we have talked about this in one of our Hindi streams, basically, that if there is a God, the first creation must also be eternal, basically, and that's exactly the point. God has to create time first, basically, and then within that there has to be a creation, basically.
Yeah, but the idea of creating time presupposes time.
Right. I mean, this is a kind of a contradiction in itself.
Yeah. How does God go from the non-existence of something to the existence of something? Reality is
for a moment, even if for a moment we gave up the idea that any creation requires time, basically, right? Not all creations require time, basically. Even if granted that, then still we have a problem, basically. That's what the point is, basically, right? And another point here is these guys assume that something can't come from nothing, yet God can create something from nothing, basically, because there was nothing, and then God created universe from nothing, pretty much, right? So something can come from nothing. I mean, in principle, they can argue that no, God can do anything because that's where omnipotence comes into picture, basically. But I'm saying there is, the principle, they don't hold that principle absolutely. That's what my point is.
I would say that is still less difficult than the idea of absolute nothing and something coming from it compared to God existing, because God would be something, right? At the very minimum. So God won't be something material from which other material things arise. That's correct. So ex materia, so we're having things coming ex nihilo.
No, in that sense, then Mahadan, what happens is you have to accept that panentheism is right, because then universe is part of God, because God hasn't created from nothing, basically. Whatever the essence of God was, the universe was created from it, pretty much.
That might be the case. That might be the case.
So I'm saying even if you go that route, you're still in trouble as a Muslim or as a Christian.
As a Muslim.
Right,
possibly. I would say it depends what we mean by panentheism, because if the universe comes from God, let's say, he is the necessary and sufficient conditions to give rise to a material universe. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's part of that universe. It just means that it's like a cellular duplication, as you want to call it. It means from God comes the universe. So it depends what we mean by panentheism.
No, the panentheism doesn't assume that God is part of the universe, but assumes that the universe is, essential part of God. Basically, the other way around, right? Other way around.
I imagine panentheism to be the following: imagine a massive clock, and part of the clock is the hands, and the universe is the hands, which is part of the clock, right? Whereas I would imagine in the thought that I'm thinking about, where God creates the universe from himself, is more like a cell duplicating itself or something, and then it turns into two individual distinct entities, right? Or like a leaf falling from a tree, and then the leaf becomes a tree of its own, or something like that. Yeah, that's what I'm imagining, right? That from God. I'm not saying it's coming from a physical part of God, because God is not a physical being. I'm saying from its immaterial part comes a physical part, and then it's separate to him. So it's not. So then now we have two distinct entities. Whereas within the clock, we don't have two distinct entities. We have one entity attached to another entity, which is part of the bigger entity. The small entity is part of the bigger entity, right? I see something like that. So that's my kind of distinction between panentheism and this idea of monotheism that I'm thinking about. But But whatever the case, there is an issue there's plenty of other issues there, because what you're talking, if we do go with the idea that from an immaterial God came a material universe, if theists believe how from matter comes consciousness, then vice versa, we can flip it around and say how from consciousness comes matter, right? because the whole motivator behind, let's say, the hard problem of consciousness, which is like feelings and ideas and consciousness itself, phenomenal experience, comes from from matter, from atoms, from the brain, from neurotransmitters. At what point does molecules produce these feelings? At what point, or how is it possible that matter can produce a phenomenal experience? From matter, you can't get phenomenal experiences. That there's like a logical contradiction, or is metaphysically absurd. But if that's the case, then the motivator behind that is that the thing in and of itself, matter, must have phenomenal experiences, the ability to produce phenomenal experience in the first place, or have it in them. The effects must be existent, inherent in them, to be able to produce it. Matter can't do it. But the same thing applies the other way around. If that's the case, then how does consciousness, how does immaterial reality produce materials or matter or atoms, or etc.? It's just turning it around on its head. And many theists have a problem with that as well. So that, again, what we're seeing is that when with these things is that if we think something from nothing or a time coming from nothing is a problem, unless the theist offers something more plausible, then we are in epistemic similar ground, right? They're also positing a strange metaphysics of an atemporal being able to do temporal things, a non-physical being able to do physical things, right? And then there's plenty more. And therefore, I don't think if theists are willing to entertain these are possible, then I'm pretty sure Richard Dawkins can just entertain it's possible that there was no beginning and there's no before the Big Bang and time just came into existence. That's it. The end.
Yes, Madan. I just wanted to share this video here. Allah's first creation must be eternal. Basically, the point you were talking about, similar to that. Basically, we did talk about it about 4 months back in one of our Hindi Urdu stream. Just wanted to point that out, basically. All right. Anyways, let's move on with. So what I have done. Anybody who's listening, if you want to join and talk to us, maybe if you are a Muslim or a Christian or a Hindu, or believe in any other god or gods, and you want to convince us to believe in what you believe and you have reasons, please do drop by and convince us, basically. So what we are thinking of doing is we are going to start one such maybe regular stream where we are going to have guest callers and would like you to come and say why you believe, and if you can convince us, pretty good, pose your arguments. We're gonna have nice conversation. That's about it. Okay, so now we should move on to. All right.
To exist has a cause.
Yes.
The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause.
Yes.
We are not invoking anything except basic, simple logic. Now, the problem with Professor Dawkins...
Madan, I'm just going to go back here.
The universe began argument.
That cannot make sense to you.
So let's go back to Imam Ghazali's argument, the Kalam cosmological argument.
Yeah.
Whatever begins to exist has a cause.
Yes.
The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause.
Yes.
We are not invoking anything except basic, simple logic. Now, the problem with Professor Dawkins, and this is for anybody that's read his book, The God Delusion, is he is weak in philosophy. He may be strong in biological science, but he's weak in philosophy, which is why when it comes to someone like Piers Morgan, who's a journalist, who's not a scientist himself or a physicist or a philosopher, he can corner him like this. And you can actually see through his body language and his demeanor that it's very difficult for him to speak about this topic.
Exactly. And you know what's really profound? Imagine all of the people that left their faith, be it Christianity, well, I mean, just imagine them on the day of judgment, and this clown is there with this illogical, irrational sense, whatever he has, yeah, and I mean, just imagine the absolute utter horror of listening to this fool, this clown that has no idea what he's talking about, cannot even explain the basic principle except that there was something before. I mean, just the utter devastation of losing this life and the hereafter because of someone like him. Look at his face. I mean, a cultural Christian atheist.
The thing that we need to keep in mind is somebody may be very good at their field. They may be very good at zoology. They may be very good at explaining, say, the selfish gene idea, which is what Richard Dawkins is very good at. But then when it comes down to logical issues, we shouldn't think, oh, he has a monopoly on thinking because he's an Oxford professor. We should also ask those critical questions.
But they don't, because they are insecure. That's why they treat him like a prophet. Whatever he says, it's like, oh, we are blind faith.
But doesn't code have to have a coder?
The thing is, these guys,
Martin,
one on the left is supremely annoying because he sounds like
I think he's calling Dawkins a clown. I think people should know who's the clown here, pretty much, right?
Yeah, he sounds like a penguin who just learned to speak yesterday, right? Yeah. And he doesn't. It's like flapping his fins or whatever you want to call them, hands, arms.
Exactly. I think he's since I saw that video where he's he said, I'm proud of it. That video has just gone in my head, basically. You remember that video? He said, what's the punishment for apostasy? And he said, yes, the capital punishment will be carried on you, and I'm proud of it. I think since then I have started really reviling him pretty much, basically. Anyways, getting back to the critique of the review, basically. Go ahead.
I mean, so they're right that you need to follow the experts, but why is then? This is the thing. Here's the thing. You got to be very careful of what's happening. Richard Dawkins was asked about the universe. Richard Dawkins did not say, this is my personal opinion. He said, my physicist friends tell me, the physicist friends, and he is in good company. The vast majority of physicists, the vast majority of cosmologists, they are not theists. This is what Subboor doesn't understand. Subboor is here talking. What are they talking about? They've been critical.
I mean, and he clarified that I'm not really the right person to answer. But this is what I heard. I mean, he clarified it very,
Exactly. So what is Subboor talking about? Subboor is there talking about, you need to remember here, that, he's a biologist. He's not talking about from his biological expertise. He's referring to physicists. He's referring to cosmologists. Exactly. And he's not referring to Lawrence Krauss. Who the hell where did he say Lawrence Krauss? Why are you strawmanning him? Is Lawrence Krauss the only person who thinks, for example, the universe can come from a nothing? No.
Exactly.
Is Lawrence Krauss the only physicist who thinks atheism is probably, or naturalism is a compelling account of the universe? I think the vast majority of physicists think naturalism is the compelling account of the universe, right? And they're not theists. So what is he talking about? So Subboor here is completely misrepresenting Dawkins here. Dawkins, first of all, isn't claiming anything on his credentials. He's claiming things on the credentials of physicists. And two, the physicists are on Dawkins' side. Yeah, he's not picking one or two. We don't know who he's picking on. Let's not impute meaning and interpret things like that. If I asked Dawkins, and I said, Dawkins, is the only reason you believe that the universe can operate in this particular way that you're talking about is because of one physicist? He'll say no. He's going to say the general consensus.
Or had he said that this is my feeling, right? Then it would have been, you could have questioned that as well. I mean, the way Subboor is posing it is as if that's Dawkins's own feeling, basically, right? And not some consensus of cosmologists, basically.
Exactly.
Utterly ridiculous, basically, right? One more point I wanted to make, Madan, here was he brought in Ghazali, right? And our expert on Ghazali is Ugba, who's not here, right? But the argument that he presented is not Ghazali's, by the way. Actually, it's a modified version of Ghazali's, Aquinas, and all those guys. Basically, they refined it pretty much, right? A lot of these guys refined it, and Ghazali's version, as far as I can remember, whatever exists has a cause, and reality exists. So reality must have a cause. Or basically, world exists, basically, right? Dunya exists, and that's and this was modified by William Lane Craig, whatever begins to exist, because they had to, rule out God from it. Then God
Yes.
never began to exist, basically, and that's how it is, basically, as far as I can remember. But I could be wrong, so somebody can tell me whether I'm wrong or not. Then, but I remember Ghazali's was a simpler version, pretty much, and then was modified by William Lane Craig. Anyways, you wanted to say something, add something to it?
No, I'm just lamenting at the fact that these guys, two of them, are with their egos and their idiocies, have completely misrepresented Richard Dawkins. Look, I'm no fan of Dawkins. I'm the one who has been repeatedly on this stream said that Richard Dawkins' he's not a philosopher. His philosophical knowledge about lots of stuff, a lot of the arguments that he tackles and addresses are weak indeed. But here, so I'm not like a fan of Richard Dawkins.
I think none of us is a fan of Dawkins.
Yeah, we're not basically emotionally connected to Dawkins. We treat
He's
him,
not our prophet.
Yeah, we treat him with some degree of respect, especially in the fields. But I have repeatedly attacked the credentials, the opinions of some of the four horsemen of the popular atheist community. I myself am from a fringe philosophical community, and I like my fringe philosophers. And in that spirit, as many fringe philosophers do, we try and deride the most mainstream atheists, even though they have some merits, definitely lots of in terms of public intellectualism, they do some degree of a good job and some degree of a bad job as well in some respects. Having said that, even then, these two guys are wrong because they're completely misunderstanding what Dawkins is not talking about his own feelings or what he thinks. He's appealing to the physics community, and it's completely wrong for Dawah to go. He's misleading everybody because he, at least here, I don't know about his book, but here he's relying upon the shoulders of physicists.
All right. All right, let's move on then.
No, of course it doesn't.
Okay, that doesn't make any sense. What is Piers Morgan basically doing? He's asking a basic question of inference, the same question which Maya is, speaking about in the previous interview. We are not talking about God of the gaps. We are using our minds and our past experience to deduct that if there is a imprint of design, there must be a designer. And if there's a code, there must be a coder.
Yes.
And, the other day when we were in Bosnia, we were, me, you, and Zishan, we were talking about the genetic, the DNA strand, how it can be read from left to right or right to left, or it can be read 3D, and the amount of information in it. And then one of the things that you were saying is that it has more information than all of the books that you get in a library. So all of that information, we want to say, no, that's an accident. But here we are watching this video, and we can see there's writing Piers Morgan, Richard Dawkins.
Requires intelligence.
Exactly.
Simple as that.
But look at the confidence and the categorical way that he's speaking. No.
Yeah.
Not even a possibility of maybe. It's just no.
Yeah. SubhanAllah. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, the speech is like sihr. SubhanAllah. Look how he's just demonstrating.
Can you pause it? Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you ask these two jokers, is there a possibility, maybe like a small, or the Quran being false, they would say, no, it's the absolute truth. Yeah, because I know Subboor loves to talk about absolute certainties and absolute truth. And he thinks, for example, he said it before, this is why I'm not misrepresenting or misquoting him, that, unlike induction, there are absolute truths when it comes to Islam. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So where is the humility there? Where is the lack of arrogance? Isn't that cocksure certainty? So first of all, that's just hypocritical, inconsistent, contradictory behavior. And look, it makes I'll be honest, it would make any person's blood boil when the level of criticism is so simple that they can't see it. It smacks them in their own faces. Right? Why would Richard Dawkins therefore share your humility when you don't have that humility yourself? Right.
Madan just reading this comment from Bilal. Bilal is our long-time listener, and I think, I don't know if you remember, he told long time back that he's from Bosnia. These guys were talking about they were in Bosnia. Bilal says that I'm from Bosnia. Bilal, I'm saying you should have gone there and questioned them, basically, from whatever you have heard from our streams. Not even from our streams. I'm pretty sure you are knowledgeable enough to challenge those guys. Anyways, yeah.
But before we proceed, can you just go back to that statement where Dawkins said no to Piers? I just want to hear it again. Exactly the context.
I think one question that I'll ask these guys, is, I don't know where it is. Yeah, here. Okay.
Play it first.
So the first question I'll ask them is, what is design?
That's why they don't, because they are
How do you get to know what is design, basically?
insecure. That's why they treat him like a prophet. Whatever he says, it's like, oh, we are blind faith.
But doesn't code have to have a coder?
No, of course it doesn't.
Okay, that doesn't make
All right,
any
pause it,
sense.
pause it.
What is Piers Morgan basically doing? He's
Pause it. This is nothing. Okay, so oh my god, this is just so embarrassing, right?
These
not-
guys are, yeah.
Yeah, this is embarrassing. So
I mean, I think what. Sorry, go ahead.
let me explain. Let me explain. So the idea is, doesn't a code have to have a coder? That's a necessary statement. Code has to have a coder, right? And Richard Dawkins is saying, no, it doesn't necessarily have to have a coder. Codes do have coders. He's not saying codes don't have coders. It's just that not all codes have to have coders, right?
Yeah. So it doesn't necessitate them, basically. There is no necessary condition attached to it, basically, to have it, basically.
Yeah.
And that's
So-
the point. And in here, what Dawkins is talking about, and this is not just any code, this is talking about a code particular in a DNA code, basically, right? Which you just can't tell. And that's why I said the very first question that you should be asking these guys is, and Subboor and Ali Dawah, basically, is how do they come to establish that something is a design, basically. It's what makes up a design, basically, a design, or a code as a code, basically, right? That's the first question that should be asked to them, and then come to the conclusion whether it requires a coder or a designer or not, basically.
Yeah, but before we go to that, I mean, they use this to jump on Dawkins to say that he doesn't have the humility to say maybe, right? But my point is that doesn't make sense in this context, right? He's not been asked the question: is it not possible that there can be a God? And he went, no. At this point, he's not saying it's improbable, but he's saying it's not possible at all. But that wasn't the question. The question,
I think question was different. It has to have a coder, right? And
Yeah,
the
it's also
question was
different.
very specific, right?
yeah,
I mean, the condition is must. The Piers Morgan question, they didn't properly hear the question, I think, right?
yeah, it doesn't make sense in this situation to say that he just said no, like as though he said no codes have no coders, and there's no possibility of any coder at all. No, that's not what he's saying. He's not even saying that there is no designers, or even
This is a problem of comprehension skills, my friend.
Yeah, he's not even saying that. He's saying it's a very similar thing, you know. Yeah, I'm just surprised, actually. Philo, I'm actually surprised at the level, because they must have. Did they not edit the video when they released it? They should have listened to it at least once, right? He said
both of them are listening to it, right? And then you can't expect too much from Ali Dawah, anyways, right? I mean, you just can't expect it. But from Subboor, to be quite frank, I don't hold him in very high esteem, very high regard. But then he should have at least listened to it properly.
Yeah,
even though he can't put very decent arguments, at least he should have understood it properly.
Yeah, the reason I said rewind, because I wanted to find out what was the question, simply because I don't remember anything being posed in that way, because I don't remember. I was looking for a question like the following from Piers Morgan. What are you saying, really, that there is no possibility of a God at all at any place? And then Richard Dawkins, with absolute certainty, said nope, no possibility whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly.
Now that would make sense for say that, you know, he doesn't have any humility, like he just says no like that. But that's not the question. The question was, you know, is it necessarily the case that all codes have to have a coder? And he said, not necessarily. That could be what could motivate that. That could be many things. He could be thinking that most codes require a coder, but there's exceptional codes that don't. It could also mean that even a theist could say this. Imagine if you believe that every code has to have a coder, right? Right.
So I think here's the discrepancy probably, and I'm trying to give them. Sure.
Let me
Finish.
make the point here.
Sure.
Even a theist can say this, that every code has to have a coder. But then if you say, for example, in all possible worlds, well, no, there could be one possible world where there is a code without a coder because it's logically consistent. All I mean then when I say every code has to have a coder, I mean in this world, if there's codes, then there has to be a coder based on induction. But there can be one logically possible world there's no contradictions where there's a code without a coder, right? Even a theist can accept that, and that doesn't mean that you just said there's no possibility. The way it seems as though they thought, I think Subboor and him thought, what's his name, the idiot, Ali Dawah. Him thought that he was asked, but can there not just be a coder? And he said, there's no possibility for there to be a coder.
Right.
So, as though Piers Morgan asked, cannot there be a coder? So no, there's no possibility of being a coder. But that's not what was said. He said, doesn't a code have to have a coder? And he said, no. That doesn't mean he doesn't think codes have coders. He obviously thinks that. Oh my God, I'm so surprised. I mean, I just don't expect this level of critique. But sorry, go on.
I think the point I was thinking of here is, the question itself is probably, a loaded question. Doesn't a code require a coder? Code has to have a coder, basically. I mean, if you're definitionally saying that a code always comes from a coder, then probably that answer makes sense, that, saying no doesn't make any sense over there. But that's not true, basically. I mean, I'm saying that's a very, very definitional question, in a sense that only if you'll come to that conclusion that these two clowns have come to, if you definitionally agree to that point that, by a requirement, a coder has to have, a code has to have a coder. But that's not necessary. And here, and I just want to specify here, these guys, at least Dawkins and Piers Morgan, when they're talking about it, they're talking about specific DNA code, basically. And there's no precedent to it, basically, that it can come from a coder, basically.
I mean, one thing you could say is that DNA isn't really a code. We metaphorically describe it as a code, but the code implies
it's considered to be a code because it gives us an easy understanding, basically.
Yes. But it's not. So we can talk about the anthropomorphic version of the code, which code means there's a coder, and we talk about the non-anthropomorphic version of the code, non-anthropocentric version of a code, which it just means it's like it's a set of kind of instructions. It's very difficult to talk about it without using the same anthropomorphic language, like instruction or blueprint. But it's like a blueprint. It's like a set of instructions, but it's not really instructions in the sense that there was an instructor to put it in there, or a designer or an artificer, right? Daniel Dennett thinks that, for example, no, in fact, there is design in the universe. There is design without a designer. It's just that evolution did the designing. So design is not the exclusive domain. We're not just talking metaphorically, but we actually mean that, yes, there is a designer. But the there is design. Oh, sorry, let me clarify for the third time. He not only may accept that there's design, but he may even accept that there's a designer, but the designer was evolution. So it kind of depends what you're talking about and how we're talking about.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, you can have a designer which is not anthropomorphic, pretty much, or doesn't have, it's not a mind, very much.
Yeah, but then, just on the code point, what is a code? Like, if I ask Philo, because you're in the world of computing, how would you define a code?
It's an orderly set of instructions, pretty much, in a sense, right? Okay. It gives you this, and if you do this, and it'll do these tasks, pretty much, right? And that's what appears to us, the DNA to be, pretty much, the set of instructions there to do a certain things, pretty much, right?
Yeah, so that's a code, a set of rules.
But that's it appears as a code in a sense. But then that's
can you say a set of rules?
Yeah, I mean it's a set of instructions, basically, right? In a sense, right?
Yeah. Okay. So in that sense, I mean, the way they say the code doesn't have a coder is very similar to a design who doesn't have a designer. All design things must have a designer. All codes must have a code. It's the same thing. All machines must have a machine maker. All paintings must have a painter. It's just standard design argument. And as you know, one of the standard objections is the design argument. Then who created the designer? Like, let's say God, and God doesn't have a designer, and therefore there's one design thing without a designer. that has all the features of design, right? And in the same sense, you could say it has all the features of code, right? That doesn't have a coder, right? Because as you said, a code is like a set of rules, and is God bound by rules? Of course he is, right? He has some rules that make sense of his being. For example, he's omnipotent, he's omnibenevolent, and those are a set of rules, right? Once you put the properties and attributes in, it acts as like a set of instructions that acts like a set of codes, right? Omnibenevolent beings, it might be a different type of code. It might be, actually, you may say it's a very simple code. It's not a very complex code. It's just omnibenevolence implies XYZ. Omnipotence implies XYZ, right? Set of codes. But what are these codes? Where did they come from? Was there a coder? No, there wasn't, because God is.
Exactly.
So we have the same issue there. So, yeah. So, which is kind of the same sort of who created the designer kind of objection.
Right.
Yeah, because God arguably, I mean, you can program within a system, let's say computers, you can create a fictional being, right, with magical.
Or if you don't agree to that argument that Madan has posed, then you will have to probably resort to divine simplicity, basically, and assume God to be just a creator. That's about it. No attributes, nothing, pretty much. Right?
Which doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense, pretty much, right? So, I mean, I'm saying to theists that they don't have a way out. They think they do. I mean, these guys especially, specifically Ali Dawah and Subboor, that, okay, by doing this, we have a way out. We have our own way. But it doesn't work. You just can't beat it, pretty much. Just can't do it. All right. Sorry, Madan. You want to add something? Shall we move on with this? I opened the...
Yeah, just move on. Continue the stream.
I opened the link, and what I want to do here is do something that I usually do, basically, at this point in our stream. So let me do that. And that's something that I usually post, basically, right? And that's this screen. I think we need to make a little bit better of a screen here, because for some reason, Madan, can you see it?
Yeah, I can.
We are materialists, basically, right? And we are looking for your support. So anybody who listens to us, is listening to us, if you're capable, if you can do it, please support us. Because if you do support us, we are going to be more motivated to bring better and better content. So you can support us on patreon.com/philosapiens. You can also support us on buymeacoffee.com/philosapiens. You can do super chats, you can buy memberships, you can do so many different things. But if you think you are not capable, but if you're not capable, you can still support us by liking, sharing, press the notification bell, be here, be present, comment after the stream is over, so that our stream reaches to more and more people. So do all those things. One more thing to remember, so far we have been doing this stream on Philosapiens channel, but our English only channel is Unveiling Faith. You can see the scroll bar. You'll find a link to that. It's at @Unveiling Faith. That's gonna become our de facto English streaming channel, and this will become de facto Hindi Urdu streaming channel once we have enough support on that channel. So yes, guys, do support us in any which way you can.
I'll just say, as it just occurred to me, even with divine simplicity, you're going to have some rules. There is no rule-free entity or thing. Everything is bound by some rules, possibly apart from maybe nothing. Even that has some rules, and that's why it sounds contradictory.
I agree. I mean, all I wanted to say there was, with divine simplicity, you can minimize your damage pretty much.
Perhaps so, because you're going to still end up with a being with
some, at least creation is the attribute, right?
Yes,
he creates, basically.
And those are rules. Right? Yeah.
And anybody you can try to wiggle out with that by saying essence and all those things, right? Yeah.
But anybody who knows programming, so as long as you have some rules, it's like a code. That's what we mean by code: instructions, some rules, something that guides it. It has to have some rules. I mean, I just don't see this possibility at all. The other thing I wanted to say very quickly is the reason why I kept it unfinished. I just remembered now that I didn't, when I was talking about the Big Bang and the interpretation of what it means by saying that there is no prior, there is no before, because time starts then, and therefore it doesn't make sense to talk about it before. And then and Subboor was saying that Dawkins is getting this from Lawrence Krauss, and no, that's not the case. And I said to you, there's two ways of thinking about that. One, that there's a contradiction, and I didn't go on to explain the second one, right? Because we just talked about the first. So I'm just going to talk about the second one. The second interpretation is that it's not as though time. It's not necessarily saying that time came into existence. It's saying that, far as we know, our best knowledge suggests that time came into existence, but our knowledge also breaks down. Now, that does not mean ontologically there was actual no time, and then, or there was nothing for causation to operate. What it means is that we just get to this kind of blank, right, where we know there is no time here. So to say so when we then to say that there was no before is not actually saying that there could not be any before. Is that we have not enough knowledge to know what there is before. That's another way of interpreting it, because seems like a plausible interpretation of the physics community right now, simply because we actually don't know the status of the Big Bang, especially with quantum mechanics and reconciling it with relativity, right, and so on. So since we don't know the status of it, we know whether or not there was something before. When people say stuff like there was no before, I think it has to be qualified with a caveat that this is the best sort of knowledge that we have, suggesting that time just lapses out, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that we're committing a contradiction. We're actually saying there was nothing, and then from nothing something came, right? We're saying that it's open to many different possibilities. Our language just breaks down. That's another way of interpreting it. And I think Richard Dawkins would welcome all of these versions. I just wanted to clarify that.
All right, Madan, we have a few old guys, domain of knowledge here used to come. If I'm not mistaken, domain is, I don't know if he wants to reveal. Probably he has already said that in comments as well. So I think there's no problem saying that he's from Florida. I think so, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, let's move on with the video.
He's asking a basic question of inference, the same question which Maya...
All right, before we go through the video, anybody who wants to join and talk to us can join. I think I'll repost the link before I run the video again, so you guys can join and maybe ask a question, pose us a challenge if you happen to, so you can use that link to join. And let me run the video.
Speaking about in the...
Of course it doesn't.
Okay, that doesn't make any sense. What is Piers Morgan basically doing? He's asking a basic question of inference, the same question which Maya is, speaking about in the previous interview. We are not talking about God of the gaps. We are using our minds and our past experience to deduct that if there is a imprint of design, there must be a designer. And if there's a code, there must be a coder. Yes. And, the other day when we were in Bosnia, we were, me, you, and Zishan, we were talking about the genetic, the DNA strand, how it can be read from left to right or right to left, or it can be read 3D, and the amount of information in it. And then one of the things that you were saying is that it has more information than all of the books that you get in a library. So all of that information, we want to say, no, that's an accident. But here we are watching this video, and we can see there's writing Piers Morgan, Richard Dawkins.
Requires intelligence.
Exactly. Simple as that. But look at the confidence and the categorical way that he's speaking. No. Yeah. Not even a possibility of maybe. It's just no.
Yeah. SubhanAllah. That's why the Prophet said a speech is like sihr. SubhanAllah. Look how he's just demonstrating that. I mean,
let's see what else he's saying.
Okay.
Code arises spontaneously at the origin of life. Something very, very simple, probably.
Okay, wait a minute. Again, this is an assumption. This is not proven. What's the evidence for this? So he gives the answer and then he says probably. How do you know that? How do you know there's one cell, not 10 cells?
Yeah, exactly. And information is something. Yes, it's like I said before. The example that I gave is that if there is nothing, yes, absolute nothingness, you cannot. It's irrelevant to time. Time is irrelevant to the equation because the thing and the elements to make that thing is not there. So how could you be talking about probability? And I'm not saying he said that like give it enough time, but he's basically talking about by chance. How could it come? How could information arise from nothingness? It's an impossibility.
All of our experience teaches us what? It teaches us that if there is design, if there's
what is this creature saying here? I mean,
yeah, just waffling basically.
He's not.
Waffling.
He's not. Dawkins didn't say anything about codes coming from nothing, right? I thought, first of all, it was a very, very open question whether or not doesn't a code require a coder? Now that's very abstract. It's like a very abstract question. But we do know it probably means in the context of DNA, probably.
Yes.
Probably,
right.
Yeah, right. And we're not talking about something that are happening around the time of the Big Bang or before, or whatever that means. We're talking about something that happened on planet Earth, perhaps in the last 5 billion years, right? 4 billion years, right? Yeah, there's nothing. We're not talking about empty space or complete philosophical nothing and then information coming out of it. So as you can see, Ali Dawah's brain hasn't worked here. Yeah, right?
I think we have critiqued one of his, I think, science claims, Science in the Quran video, right? Anybody who wants to watch that can go and watch that. But man, this guy can think really. I think,
he seems to be the Borat of Dawah.
Borat of Dawah. That's
very nice.
That fits him on him. Perfectly.
How can it come from nothing? Very nice.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. With all due respect,
yeah, I think I think this is called the straw manning an argument, or somebody, way too much basically.
Yeah, as you know, when we come on these streams, we barely engage in these sort of personal insults. So why are we doing it now? And it's just the level of, because he's showing a lot of disdain here. Whenever somebody shows disdain, if he still justifies it with an intellectual argument, I'll still respect it. But he's showing disdain and just really, really, really getting it wrong, grossly wrong, to the point where it's laughable. This is why I'm issuing these insults against him. That nobody said a code came out of nothing, and yeah.
I mean, even the first cell that he's talking about, first cell, where did the first cell come from, right? He's not saying it came from nothing. The first code, if you want to call it, basically. I mean, there is a whole body of knowledge and a research that's going on, pretty much, right? And what these guys are thinking in their heads, basically, is that, because we don't have an answer as yet, we probably won't ever, and that's why our God is right, basically. God did it, basically. And then they have the audacity to say that this is not the God of the gaps, basically, right?
Yeah. And just to reiterate, just because I heard it again, and as Subboor was saying, Subboor said, Richard Dawkins doesn't even accept a maybe a code requires a coder. Wait a minute, his answer is compatible with that. His answer did not say anything about, no, it just makes me laugh thinking about this. His answer was to the question, does a code require a coder? Right? And he said no. That is compatible
I think these guys need to be told that their weak comprehension abilities does not mean that
it's logic one. This is logic 101. It's a non sequitur thing that Richard Dawkins means codes don't have coders. He's not said codes don't have coders. He said codes don't require a coder. Not all codes require a coder. That's what he's saying. Does a code require a coder? No. That is compatible with some codes require coders. That is because I'm pretty sure if you ask Richard Dawkins, wait, did your computer coding? Did the coding behind this application that you're using have a coder? He'll say yes. He's not saying that maybe so I just don't understand what he's saying. Let me try to be charitable to Subboor. Maybe he just means that Richard Dawkins is saying no to the fact that the DNA code doesn't have a coda. But again, he's not saying the DNA code doesn't have a coda. Not at least here. I know he does say it in other places, but he's saying that the DNA code, let's contextualize it, the DNA code does not require a coda. Remember that there are two separate statements. So Piers Morgan asked him, doesn't a code require a coda? AKA, doesn't DNA require a coda?
And I think even then, I think Dawkins is right.
Yeah. No, even then he's right.
All he's saying, no, it doesn't require it, basically.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, it doesn't require it, which is not the same thing. Which is not the same thing as saying there is no possibility of there being a coda. It just says it doesn't require it. Yeah, it could be. This is that.
It is
statement.
possible that it has. It is also possible that it doesn't have. Basically, and both the options are open, pretty much in that case.
Yeah, it's like saying you see a murder. Doesn't this murder require a girl to do it? And then you go, no, it doesn't. Because are you saying that it couldn't be a girl? Like, no, I didn't say it couldn't be a girl. I know. Are you saying there's no possibility that it could be a girl? I was like,
no, not even that. Yeah.
I'm just saying that it doesn't require it to be a girl. It can be a girl or it can be a boy. I'm open,
Exactly.
So his answer at the plain-faced, on the literal level, is compatible with both. And we know that he is both because Richard Dawkins isn't a strong atheist of absolute certainty. He even says that there is a small possibility that there's a designer on God. Right?
Yeah. I think he's right.
Subboor's read his book, so why is he doing it? Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
No, I think I was just seconding your point. He says on Dawkins scale he's at about 6.8 or something like that. 1 to 7 or 0 to 7, right? He's at he's a very strong atheist, but he's not 7. He's like 6.8 or something. That he strongly believes that there's no God. But he's not like absolutely sure about that, and that's true. And if Subboor has read his book, then he's probably aware of that fact, pretty much.
Yeah.
In any case, yeah. I think
I noticed these sort of mishaps happen a lot amongst theists. For some reason, they don't understand the difference between. It's not necessarily the case, and this same issue arises in the kind of the gumball example, an analogy of atheism, for example, when they try to explain that. The
odd gumballs or even gumballs.
Yeah. They don't understand the fact that you're saying that it's not necessarily the case that God exists is not the same thing as saying God doesn't exist. It's not possible, something like that. And they just don't understand.
Yeah. These guys don't understand that fine.
And for some reason, exactly. And it's manifesting in this area as well. It's weird. It's just weird how this is just. Does that mean there's something wrong with their brains? I don't know. With their imagination, their thinking capacities. What is it?
I think they are quick to jump to a conclusion that supports their own firmly held beliefs, pretty much, right? I think that's the carelessness, I would say, right? I mean, probably even Subboor maybe heard it, but he just didn't think it too properly, right? I would say. I don't know. I can't read their minds, by the way.
Okay.
Let's carry on. All right. I think let's finish in next 5-10 minutes.
Information, if there's coding, we make an inference. But when it comes to the coding that we find in the DNA, we are told to switch off the logic button. We're told to not be consistent and to say, actually, categorically, there's no design. And this is the problem when you mix biology with philosophy, but you don't actually tell people that actually what I'm doing here is just my own personal belief. It's got nothing to do with the biological data, because the biological data is there's coding. Any inferences that you make, any philosophical things that you say, such as, no, there's definitely no designer, there's a background assumption of naturalism, which is not being said here.
Exactly. And this is in a nutshell. We'll end on this note, is that this is kufr. Kufr is basically you are hiding the truth. You are basically, because of your ego, because you hate God, because I don't know if he said he was molested when he was young as well. I don't know if it was him, or whatever it is. You just hate God. And because of that, anything.
You heard what he said. Wow, man. this is the perfect review. Was he? Did I hear it right? He said,
Yeah.
was he molested as a child or what?
Yeah, I mean, they're quick to launch these ad hominems. Or I don't think it's necessarily an ad hominem, so I'll give them that. But whatever the case, a character attack. The
Right.
idea that there's some sort of ill motivations that motivate the atheist in order to arrive at these conclusions that differ, that are not necessarily intellectually thought out or based on the prowess of reasoning, but due to other irrelevant factors, emotions that lead you down that path rather than intellectual thinking. First of all, that could particularly apply to specific atheists. I'm not saying that's not the case. I don't know the case that it is the case for Richard Dawkins or whatever. There's no clear evidence that's the case. But again, theists are not free from this particular. And the reason I'm saying that playing this tit for tat game is because all of these criticisms are. You have to, if you're criticizing somebody about a problem, you have to be. It's not as though you have to be free from those problems for the criticism to be true. But if you're offering something alternative as a model and replacement, then that should be free from those same criticisms. And I noticed that they're not offering something that is free from the same model. For example, how do
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
arrive?
I mean, at least
How
you
do
have
you
to be
arrive?
consistent enough, right?
Yeah. How do you arrive at Islam? Is it just pure intellectualism? It's not. It's through emotions, through feelings. And they parade and proudly declare the emotional noise that fetters them in religious mind. They're completely bathing in it. They're swimming in it. It's a religious zeal that is highly emotional. It's highly intoxicating. It's highly powerful. There's a lot of feelings attached to it. There is a lot of theatricalness or theatricality involved in it. For example, you're telling people, there's going to be a hellfire, there's going to be a heaven, this life is limited. You're luring people into this kind of situation. It's always appealing to emotion. The entire case is emotionally, top to bottom emotional, to the point
Right.
where
I mean, if you go to khutbas, you listen to all these things pretty much, right? I mean, these things are pounded upon you pretty much. All these emotions, pretty much, right?
So exactly. So how dare this guy Borat of Dawah come out with an example of maybe it's
Right.
emotional things affecting? I mean, come on.
I mean, why do they resort to this line of attacking whenever somebody leaves their religion and Islam in particular? There's a resort to saying that shaitan is giving waswasas and all those things pretty much, right? Or they wanted material things, they wanted to be go out and have sex and all those things. I mean, what does it have to do? Why can't somebody just ratiocinate in their healthy minds, be skeptic, and think through all these things and come to a conclusion that no, these things are not making sense. A lot of these things are inconsistent within themselves or contradictory.
Yeah.
And then,
I mean, Ali Dawah's friend, for example, Muhammad Hijab, had said that if he was an atheist, he'll be depressed, he'll probably kill himself. Like that is an emotion. That's not an emotional bias. That has no bearing upon his intellectuality. He just arrived at the truth free of, free thinking and rationality. Not the fact that he will rather kill himself if one of the other conclusions were true. That's the biggest bias in the world. That's a massive prejudice. Come on. You just said, I'll kill myself if the other answer was true.
I mean, and
by the way, I'm a scientist.
He's considered to be the intellectual stalwart among Dawah guys, pretty much. At least considered. I'm not saying that he is, but these guys consider at least most of the followers, pretty much his followers.
Yeah.
Right?
And this
is at a stage. Yeah, I mean, if these guys are their idols, then to be honest, God save them. Yeah, I don't know. I mean. Let's see. Is there any more meat in this discussion?
To do with God, the truth you are hiding. Basically, these individuals are the figureheads of hiding the truth, and there's absolute sadly idiots there following them to hellfire. I mean, we don't repeat. He's repeating himself like a parrot. I think the matter is clear, brothers and sisters, inshallah. And the days of atheism is over. It is
Absolutely.
so over.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is the last thing I would ever do on someone like him. I mean, yeah.
I would highly recommend for somebody that wants to know the truth, who's sincere, then what you should do is never think to yourself, somebody has a monopoly on thinking. Yes, he's a professor. Yes, he's from Oxford. Yes, he's an intelligent person,
He's a jahil.
but he can be wrong.
Yes.
So we should be open and skeptical, and we should have the scientific mindset of thinking, okay, maybe I need to look at somebody else's arguments as well.
Exactly. Brothers and sisters, hope you enjoyed that video, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
All right, so let's
Are
clarify.
you just quick things? Are you open to realizing that you could be wrong? Are you seeking truth yourself, or you think that your truth is absolutely right, or your belief in your religion is absolutely? If you can honestly answer those questions, then you are, entitled to ask these questions to others as well. Pretty much, right? Anyways,
Yeah,
Marlon,
yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, first of all, I mean, it's the in Islamic circles, as Yasser Qadhi has publicly declared, there is certain things that Muslims just don't go towards. They don't go towards questioning certain things. There's limits. Remember when it came to the discussions regarding the preservation of the Quran, in a
Right.
private interaction with Muhammad Hijab, he said Muslims tend to have a limit. There are no-go areas, aka dogmas. In the scientific world, we call these dogmas. Right? In the philosophical world, we call it dogmas, unassailable, unexamined, non-interrogatable truths, axioms that you just simply accept and you don't deeply inquire whether it's true or false. You simply just accept based on authority, right? Well, that sounds like
that famous interview that
Yes.
traditional narrative has holes in it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there are certain things that they just accept. Are they subjecting their books to actual scrutiny to that level? No, they're not. So I don't know. So
I mean,
as you said,
this is a very honest question that should be asked. Whether if somebody points to them that all their logical arguments that they pose to give dawah, if those were refuted or at least shown to have problems with in them, would they at least concede the fact that their absolute belief is shaken and they're willing to reduce that absolute belief somewhat?
yeah. I mean,
If
a
they can't
lot
do
of
that, then yeah.
a lot of theists predicate their thinking on faith and feelings, and they openly declare it. They would say, even if all the evidence came out to be different, I would continue and persist in believing in this particular belief. That's not open to inquiry or subject to science or data or falsification or revision or modification. None of these things. This is just dogmatic thinking. It's just conviction and feelings. And people like when you come out and say something like, I will kill myself if atheism is true, or people like Hamza Zorses who say, I never found meaning of purpose. What does that mean? I didn't feel happy. It's like saying I don't find happiness in secularism, which is another version of Muhammad Hijab. Or when you have Abdullah, what's his name? Abdullah Andalusi, Al-Andalusi, I think is the
Abdullah al-Andalusi, right?
Yeah. Him saying that the reason that he came to Islam was, again, to find purpose and meaning. What does that mean? There's a feeling-based element to it. Now, is this done through critical thinking and science? Or did the critical thinking and science act as a veneer, a post hoc rationalization, a secondary thought afterwards in order to make sense of it to certain people? But in reality, undergirding all of that sophisticated intellectual structure, Al-Ghazali Kalam cosmological argument, is just a baby crying, for a towel, like a Freudian urge almost, needing a father figure, needing protection. No, I mean, so it just sounds so gobsmackingly, astonishingly contradictory when people talk about, subject your beliefs to scrutiny, and when we know these guys are not doing that. But the other thing I want to say, they may have said that this is the end of atheism or something. Where's the data? Did he subjected that to critical thinking? So he just looked at a video with Piers Morgan, Richard Dawkins, and that's the end of atheism.
That's called wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Kushfahmi. You're right.
Yeah, how is it the
That's
end of
wishful
atheism? Isn't secularism rising?
thinking.
What happened
I think in fact that's called the, what do you call the mollifier to a crying baby, basically. That's what they are looking for, something to appease themselves, basically. Because the trend in the recent or past 5-10 years has been that more and more people are coming out of their religions, irrespective of whether it's Islam, Christianity, or Hinduism, and becoming more secular, more, at least agnostics, basically, right?
Absolutely. So anybody
Believe in
listening to
religions per se, and they might believe in some certain kind of a spiritual entity or whatever, but at least leaving religions. That's what, and that's what has brought. I mean, there are tons and tons of videos of imams themselves, accepting the faith, accepting the point that large body of Muslims are leaving, religion, pretty much, right? So, and this is going on. This process had already started within Christianity. Now it's taking place in Islam as well. So
yeah, absolutely. So I don't understand this when, as you just said, every indicator suggests that atheism is on the rise, secularism is on the rise. Even if there is a small segment maybe of religious increase in some places of some years, the overall trends is that atheism or secularism is increasing, or it is increasing faster than any increase or small splashes of increase of theism, right? And we're talking about conversion rates. We're talking about also just general population increase. I know there's this argument of because of reproduction, Islam is going to take over. That's a different conversation. But you have to take that with a pinch of salt, simply because even though the numbers of because of the birth rate, let's say, there's going to be a difference. There's a differential between the number of, in terms of population levels. There's going to be more Muslim children. Even though that's the case, we can't make the extrapolation that by 2050 or by the year 3000 or something, there's going to be a world dominated by Muslims. Population growth levels generally tend to stabilize as the areas of the world become more industrialized, secularized, more scientific. They have more increase in
more prosperity, basically, right? The
Exactly.
prosperous a nation is, then the birth rate tends to go down, basically.
Yeah, and we need to factor. So in our projections, we need to factor that in, and some of these things don't always factor that in. The other thing is we have to factor in also whether or not they're going to be Muslim by name only, or they're going to be actually genuine Muslim. What kind of Islam are we talking about?
Right, exactly.
Right. So is it going to be a watered down Islam? Is it going to be a very different Islam? So in that sense, it would be the case still that atheism would have an impact or influence. And we can't simply say that birth rates are going to, but it won't make sense for Ali Dawah to cling on to that atheism is dying or it's a declining diet, because of birth rates. Because he's making an intellectual argument. The whole point of this video was to say that atheism is dead simply because it's weak intellectually. Now, if the reason he's going to hold on to is to say that it's because we breed faster, well, I'm sorry, that doesn't mean atheism is dead intellectually. It means that it is overcrowded because you overpopulated us, which is different. Right,
basically,
right?
Yeah, true.
So he can't rely upon that sort of fact about sociological realities that there's more Muslims growing or something for many reasons, and not even academically. Academically, atheism is actually right up there. I don't know what we're talking about. So all this time, Subboor is talking about philosophy, he's talking about biology. You can't just listen to biology, but if you just look at science, and science suggests this, it suggests this. But if you combine it with philosophy, again, let me reiterate: philosophers of science and philosophy of biology is completely happy with the idea that DNA does not have a teleological cause, a designer, an artificer, a constructor, a coder. Yeah, the vast majority of philosophy of biology professors just do any research, look through fill papers, review, read a book, pull it out, find the book, Philosophy of Biology. There is no talk about coders in it. They don't make the inference to the best explanation that there has to be a designer.
These coders and all these books are written by Discovery Institute guys, basically.
Yeah.
Right? What are you talking? Michael Behe and this guy, what's his name?
Exactly.
Myers, basically Stephen Myers and all these guys, basically.
Apart from Meyer and David Berlinski, who is not a philosopher of the relevant field, The only
Right.
so David Belinsky, I think, is a philosopher of some sense, but he's not qualified in philosophy of science nor philosophy of biology. Stephen Meyer is. The other two, Michael Behe and what's the other one? Michael Behe and who's the other guy? Well, whatever, doesn't matter.
Yeah, I forgot his name. It's not occurring. That's what I was trying to remember. Who's that other guy? His
Yeah, whatever.
name starts with some L or something, I think, but I forgot completely. But yeah, these are the only
they're
guys
scientists.
basically.
They are scientists, and they're not even biologists. One is a chemist, and the other one I think is something else. I can't remember what it was. They're not even biologists, let alone evolutionary biologists, let alone life science biologists, right? And they're not philosophers of biology either. So what? Okay, let's look at the experts then. You want me to look at the philosophers? We look at philosophers. They're all atheists. They're all secularists. They all believe in impersonal causation. They all believe that the designer wasn't required behind evolution. So what are you talking about, Subboor? It doesn't make sense. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I think Subboor is. Let's see how his debate goes with Professor Dave. I think we did talk about that earlier as well, whether that's going to happen or not. So I did communicate with Professor Dave, and I received a response from him. And contrary to what Subboor has been posting on his, his channel, Professor Dave hasn't received any, formal, he hasn't set a place or venue for his debate with Professor Dave, even though he said on videos that he's shifted the venue and, just instead of 3 debates, 1 debate on all those things. Let's see whether that happens or not. But I think, it's going to be a fun debate. If you guys are not aware, keep on lookout for it, basically. What's Mudadaku is saying? James Tour? No, I think James Tour is also one of those guys. I think I was thinking of one other guy. But
yeah,
Madan, I think you're thinking of the same guy as well.
I think
whose
so.
Name
Yeah.
Leslie Bilal is saying no, something with L, but can't recall it. Anyways, so guys, if you want to join, do join within the next 2 minutes or so. Otherwise, we're gonna shut down the stream. What do you say, Madan? We'll shut down the stream, or do you want to review any other video as well?
No. I think it's time to go.
Let's finish it over here. Yeah.
And I just want to say, I mean, everything that as Subboor was saying, the modern conclusion, or among scientists and philosophers, is that the inference to the best explanation, the simplest theory, the most probabilistic explanation, is one that involves impersonal causation in the form of the Darwinian mechanisms. Maybe there's some dispute about what sort of Darwinian mechanisms. There's some contest. There might be some challenges to the exact sort of mechanisms, but none of them entertain even the slightest realistic possibility of a designer, right? And they're using these are philosophers of science, and they think that's the best inference, best explanation, and that follows the observations that we see. That follows the evidence of evolution, the evidence of the predictions that it makes. That follows the general trend in impersonal causes that we see in the universe, which gives us the background data to think that things can happen like that. And that also allows us to also think, therefore, the first cell must have gone through some sort of evolutionary process as well. In a different sense, not necessarily natural selection per se, that affects the genome, the genetic code, right? Even that, because the first cell, it doesn't make sense to talk about the first cell. What we mean is that there would have been some rudimentary versions of it, and many of those would have also undergone this kind of like a selection process. And that's the best inference, because that follows all the background evidence. It's like if for example, we accept 10,000 years ago there was selection pressures, 100,000 years ago there was selection pressures, 50,000 years ago, then 1 million years ago, 2 million years ago, etc. And then 1 billion years ago, there was selection pressures. all right? And then we go from, eukaryotes to prokaryotes, and then we go to single-cell organisms or multi-celled organisms, before single-celled or multi-celled organisms, but less complex ones, and then even less complex multi-celled organisms, and then single-celled organisms. We still think there's selection pressure. Why would we all of a sudden then go, okay, maybe there's going to be a designer when we get stuck at explaining one part? No, we follow the background evidence, and therefore the simplest theory and the most best inference to make is the one that follows impersonal causation, impersonal explanations. And instead of positing a designer, we think there is some sort of also selective mechanism that's selected, for example, maybe an amino acid or something even simpler, some sort of self-replicating molecule, some simple self-replicating molecule. And that's where the life sciences are. If you look where the life sciences are, they think it's something around there, abiogenesis and everything. They're focusing on this. Why they're not thinking about God or a designer or an alien? That if it's been posed as a theory, is posed as a very unlikely one. The first and foremost candidates they go to is the ones that fit with naturalism, because naturalism is the frontier here. So Subboor is completely wrong at characterizing it like that.
Right. I think the very fundamental question, Mahadin, should be asked to them: how can you come to a conclusion that a highly, highly, highly unlikely event cannot really occur, and then an event for which you can't even assess any probability on? Maybe if you have to on a prior probability basis, even if you have to assign a probability, it's probably close to zero for God creating all this stuff, because we don't have any known probability for that kind of an event, pretty much, right? So for an event that you think abiogenesis or whatever that single cell came from, you think that low probability somehow just is not good enough, and then having a God is much higher probability than that. You have to demonstrate that basically, because
ultimately these frequency, we judge something as likely or unlikely generally through maybe there's different interpretations of probability theory. There's intrinsic probability, Bayesian theory, probability,
Bayesian probability, right?
And there's all frequentist interpretation, but you can combine sometimes the two. Like you can think you're a bit of a frequentist / Bayesian. And most of the time we rely upon those frequencies, the background data. The reason something is likely or unlikely is because of its happenings in the world. If it snowed, if it rained pigs every day, like the sun comes up every day, that's why we think it's a high likelihood of the sun. It's induction. But if it rained pigs instead of rainwater, if pigs fell out of the sky,
right?
That'll
be haram, by the way.
Yeah. If pigs fell out of the sky every single day, we would think it's very likely for pigs to, fly or fall out of the sky. That's how we kind of go about it. It's not because it's the craziness of the idea is only because it doesn't happen, right? So if frequently impersonal things happen, like electrons move around, atoms decay, protons can be lost, isotopes form, or
chemical reactions take place, and all those things.
Hydrogen bond with carbon, and these things happen in the world. Then it happens in the world. Simple as that. It just happens.
Right.
You think it's weird? Well, so what? Some people might think a God without a mom and dad is weird. Where's his mom and dad?
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't have a mom and dad. Wait. The inference to the best explanation is that every single person has a mom and dad. I have a mom and dad. That guy down the street has a mom and dad. All of the human population, most members of the human population had a mother and a father. So what about God? He's a person. Where's his mom and dad? That's a weird conclusion, right? But the point is they're willing to change the rules when it suits them, when they don't want to apply a principle that applies. Like most minds that we know of have brains. Most minds that we know of come from pregnancy. So
right.
It'll be to them it'll be absurd to say God came from that, and I agree it'll be absurd because we've defined God in such a way to be exempt from those rules. Well, then why can't you have impersonal causes that are exempt from the rules of design that we create? If they're willing to entertain a exceptional situation, God, then why can't they accept the possibility that we live in a universe that is exceptional, different from our human affairs? Yeah, we design stones, we design computers and those codes, but there are some codes that don't require a designer.
Exactly. All right. The guy's name that I was thinking, and probably you were thinking the same name as well, I don't know, William Dembski.
Yeah, that's it. William Dembski.
Right.
That's
So William Dembski, yeah, I don't know, for some, yeah. But
Leslie.
anyways, right, yeah, Leslie.
That's what you thought. Because with an L. Larry Dembski.
All right, everybody. Bilal, Muda, and Domain of Knowledge, everybody. Thanks for joining. And still time, if you want to join, quickly jump in. Or else we'll be shutting down in 10, 9, 8. But anyways, before you leave, I'll press you hard to support us any which way by donating to Philo Sapiens, basically on Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon, right? And you can find the link in the banner that's going beneath. Also, support us by joining our new channel, English Only channel, if you can understand English, if you speak English. And that's about it. So see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.